Okay, so my first slide is the best part of spring as a nutritionist or anybody interested in eating well is the return of farmers markets. I also think it's the return of the street fairs, but whatever rocks your boat, right? So a lot of people will ask, is farmers market food really better? And the idea is that you're supporting a local economy, you're being a locavore, it's more fresh, and it's possibly more expensive than the supermarket, depending on where you're getting bargains, but you never walk away unhappy. Okay, next thing, while you're in, since it's spring, we can now look forward to spring vegetables. Sorry, in our world, we have vegetables all year long that are grown all over the globe. So really seasonality isn't quite as important as it used to be. But I found these articles, some suggestions on the Wall Street Journal, and I want to run them by you, so just for giggles, because I think they're interesting. So the first suggestion is um, kind of dig out, what are your favorite vegetables? Do you like artichokes? I personally think artichokes are way too much work. Um, Asparagus, fine. Remember, not everybody, but a majority of humans who eat asparagus will have that funny smell in their urine within the hour or so. But asparagus is also a great source of fiber and folate, folic acid, folate, antioxidants, lutein. We'll talk about lutein later on. Fresh spring peas have good, again, the nutritional role is great. And I'm going to go down now to the first example. So back to asparagus. This article from the Wall Street Journal said you can whip up a quick mimosa. So if you remember, mimosa is sort of a champagne and an orange juice thing. So you blanch peeled asparagus in salted simmering water just until tender. That's about 6 minutes. Toss with a grainy mustard vinaigrette. Force a peeled boiled egg through a sieve and garnish. I think that sounds like a lot of work. I love a good asparagus dish that's simmered and maybe topped with my favorite dressing, which could be butter, could be olive oil. But the Wall Street Journal thinks it's a good idea to force your egg through a sieve. Okay, radishes. Wall Street Journal says, whip up a schmear, even better than butter. Use an electric mixer with a paddle attachment. Whip together half a cup of rendered duck fat. Duck fat? Okay. A small minced shallot, a couple of tablespoons of chopped parsley, and a teaspoon of lemon, seasoned with salt and pepper, or just eat them. I find I eat most of my radishes either in a salad or I put them in a taco. Either way, radishes are fun. They have that little bit of bite, and they're good sources of fiber as well. Okay, watercress. I wasn't raised on watercress. I kind of feel like it still has too much of a bitterness personally, but it has a very good nutrition profile. And as you know, it's a cousin to broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts. So the Wall Street Journal says, make a steakhouse side, peel a medium potato, cook it in salted boiling water until tender, about 20 minutes. Add a pound of watercress to the pot for about 1 minute, drain and press out the water, then puree the potato, watercress together in a food processor with a fourth cup of cream and salt and pepper. Or just eat it because it's delicious. Now, I've enjoyed wandering through Wave Hill, and there's a certain section of the part of the park where it's not very domesticated. It's kind of things will be stored there. And you can sometimes find wild watercress. And if I'm pretty confident there's no pesticides, I do like just pinching it out of the dirt, not the root, but just the leaves, and just nibble on it as I walk. Okay, dandelion greens. So this one is kind of halfway between a market green and a foraged food. And it is a spring green because, as we all start to see them, the yellow petals smiling at us in the spring. The Wall Street Journal says, make a hot bacon dressing. Okay, I'm still back at duck fat. All right, cook a few slices of bacon until crisp. Remove the bacon from the pan. Turn off the heat. Fine. Whisk together an egg, a third of a cup of water, 3 tablespoons of vinegar, a tablespoon of sugar and salt, and add a warm bacon fat. Whisk until thickened, then toss over with a half a pound of dandelion greens and crumbled bacon. Or you could just eat it, and it is quite tasty. When you get them in the market, they've been grown differently from if you forage for them in the park. Of course, you'd forage where there's no chance that there's some contamination. And they also are often kept from getting too much sunlight, because the hardier the leaf, the stronger, in fact, the more bitter the flavor. And they're often harvested before the flower appears. So if you are a dandelion fan, and it gets its name, most of the theories say it gets its name from the French, the teeth of the lion, or les dents de lion, dandelion, because oftentimes the edges of the leaf are very rigid, very sharp, like fangs. Okay. And then there's sugar snap peas, which are wonderful early spring vegetables. Wall Street Journal says, make a bright spring salad. Trim sugar snap peas, blanch and boiling with salted water until they're bright green. Drain and toss with a lemony vinaigrette. Finish with toasted walnuts, mint leaves, and a dollop of ricotta cheese. You know, that one really sounds kind of doable. And if you're not memorizing these as you go, it certainly you shouldn't have to. It's, once again, they need a tiny bit of heat and steam, and then they really welcome being accompanied by chopped nuts or toasted seeds, like toasted sesame seeds, and a little bit of something creamy and protein rich. So here we go. Okay, and then the Wall Street Journal says, take your arugula and spice up the easy green goddess dip. So there's a green goddess recipe. And some of you might recall that we made a dressing at our cooking club, and we put it over arugula. The dressing included olive oil, slightly melted chips of chocolate, and red wine vinegar, and it was to die for. We also threw on top of our arugula dried cranberries, diced dried apricots, and you can then optionally add chopped almonds, chopped cashews, chopped walnuts. We had a good old time. So arugula invites itself to your table for lots of different ways. And then scallions. The Wall Street Journal says, make crostini, toss, trim scallions, olive oil, salt, pepper, broil on a sheet. I've already seen way too many steps in this. I find scallions are great to just accompany lots and lots of other things. They fortunately have a lovely, milder flavor than onion. And the offerings that have been by the organization that RSS has engaged to teach about vegetables has done some great things with ideas for scallions and other veggies. Okay, and the last one, rhubarb. Now this one is also halfway between foraging and halfway between market. This is a case of the rhubarb stalk is pretty unimpressive. So you really do add lots of things to it. Sweetener, lemon. Some people will cook them together with other berries and make a pie or a jam or jelly. Remember, do not eat the leaves, because the leaves are very high in oxalic acid. And usually when you buy them, the leaves may not be attached. But I have neighbors who have them growing in their yard. And pretty much you don't want to eat the leaf because it's bitter. And curiously, the rhubarb is a cousin of the buckwheat plant. These guys hang out and their DNA gets crossed. Okay. Now, that was my first suggestion about nutritious ways to enjoy spring. Here comes number 2. Not just the farmer's market vegetables, but there are some spring edible meats that are tasty and safe. Here's an example. Violets. Violets are very delicate. The flower is edible. The leaves are edible. And my experience is it doesn't matter too carefully how long it's been since it erupted from the ground. I've actually put the flowers in ice cubes. Excuse me. saving them for some special occasion when you may want to add ice cubes to something. I did actually save them, and they never got used, and they were in the freezer for several months because violets very much are a very short window of being able to harvest them. So it was somewhere around July or August, and someone said, "Oh, bring over some ice cubes," which my husband grabbed everything in the refrigerator in the bag. And when they brought them to someone's home, they said, "Oh, you got contaminated with something. There's something in them. It's a mess." And I said, "Oh no, you're fine. Just enjoy the ice cubes with the flour." This also goes nicely with any kind of vinaigrette. It has vitamin C. It has fiber. These are great. To my knowledge, there have not been significant reports of adverse reactions like, allergies or something. And then there's purslane. This one you will also find in the farmer's market. It is popular, I think, throughout the whole continent. It's called verdolaga. In Latin America, people add it to salads. You can add it to a stew if you're braising something. And curiously, it's one of the plant foods that has an association with having lots of omega-3 fats. The funny thing about purslane is that you almost can't get rid of it, so you might as well harvest it and eat it because it is everywhere. Okay, then the last one of my foraged or looking for edible is chickweed. And chickweed has a fascinating history, probably originated in Europe and was brought here as seeds. It escaped the seeds for wheat or something that early settlers brought. It has established itself everywhere. It's also very high in vitamin C. And while food historians may not be able to nail it, there are stories of indigenous people using the chickweed leaves as a source of vitamin C to prevent scurvy. Also contains some calcium and some iron. And you can recognize it because it's really a spreading little flat, very, again, mild tasting. I would mix this with arugula anytime. And you can recognize the flower with the 5 sets of double petals. And most of us have seen chickweed because this is what we face when we come outside and we haven't done gardening or yard management for a while. Kind of like purslane, it'll grow like crazy, and before you know it, it's a ground cover and you can't remember what's under it. But if you don't mind taking it in, rinsing it off, it could make a great salad. Okay, so we're talking about 10 nutritious ways to get into spring. My third way, we're still talking vegetables, is to grow your own. So I'm almost worried here because we started a minute or two late. I don't want to talk too fast and have the content of my presentation run out too early. So growing your own, sometimes that's as simple as regrowing. And because most of the herbs that we love, mint, lemon mint, spearmint, peppermint, even the leafy ones that I'm showing here, many times they will root if left in water, and then you can plant the rooted one or continue to cut fresh from the water that it's rooted in. This one is thyme. This one I believe is peppermint or spearmint, and this one is I believe rosemary. Also genetic cousins. So this is a celery stalk. You won't get a full head of celery, but you get just little bits of green. And I know that there's going to be a presentation offered through RSS about regrowing your vegetables. So I'm not going to give you tons of details now. But I know there's a joke that many say, once you buy a bunch of scallions, you should never have to buy them again because you really can't put them in water. And they do come back and bring you lots of greens if you just use a few a day. Okay, another example of what you can do with celery and cabbage and your, let's say, bok choy, they do come back. Again, not a pound, but a little something to add to a salad. And of course, community gardening. And this is where I want to, applaud my buddy Barbara as the master gardener. Okay, next one, number 4, as nutritious ways to get into spring. Still focusing on the fact that spring brings us a bounty of cool weather, vegetables, and not so many fruits just yet. And the science is very strong for what are called the antioxidant properties of these foods. Not just vegetables, I'm going to talk about a few, but especially vegetables. So let me start by defining oxidant. I think I've done this before, so if you've heard my Sesame Street version of it, just hang on and I'll try to get through it. So oxidant means that it's an atom of oxygen that is kind of loose. It should always be captured or bound to something else. But when you have loose oxygen atoms, they're called free radicals. And for those of us in our 60s and 70s and 80s, remember the radicals of the 60s. So it's kind of like that. And the body has a lot of normal systems for capturing these radical atoms of oxygen. But sometimes there may be processes in the body in which the free oxygen atoms are not captured. So it's good to have something which will be an antioxidant. In other words, find that atom, bind it, have an affinity to bind it. So I make the example of if you're in a room with normal walls and you have 2 ping pong balls, we're going to call the ping pong balls your oxygen atom that's free, your free radical. If they bounce against the wall, throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the years, you're not going to get severe damage. But suppose you have 50 ping pong balls that are every day bouncing against the walls. You can see how that is comparable to the idea of injury to your cells. So you want antioxidants. And here's what we got. Put simply, now I didn't develop this chart, but it says the ability to measure the oxidation reduction in the body, hope that makes sense, is something which can then be assigned to different vegetables and fruits and other foods, as well as lifestyle. So we're going to talk first about vegetables, fruits, legumes. Tomatoes have the highest anti-inflammatory, antioxidant as well factors. And if the negative sign, or we can just say the hyphen, is indication of its anti-inflammatory. But by the way, I would probably say it's clear that here I talk about antioxidant and here I talk anti-inflammatory. The processes overlap. So if I focus on anti-inflammatory, it includes foods which are antioxidants that can capture those crazy oxygen atoms that are running wild. Okay, tomatoes. Then you see apples and berries, deep yellow, orange vegetables and fruits, nuts, peanut butter, other fruits and fruit juices, not your Sunny Delight, but like an apple or an orange juice or pear juice, not pear nectar. Okay, and then other vegetables like okra, peppers, and onions. Then you see the numbers go down, and while it looks like, oh man, beans and string beans are kind of puny, they're only a 0.04 compared to tomatoes, they're still anti-inflammatory, they're still excellent. And on the right, what a surprise, being a moderate drinker has a significant anti-inflammatory effect, as well as coffee and tea. Now I'm going to go to the next page. The next page is actually an image. This is where you will see your anti-inflammatory workers right here. The more bright the green, the orange, the red, the yellow, and also purple, the more anti-inflammatory activity is going on. Now the of course these are pretty. The pro-inflammatory means that when eating these foods, they can potentially increase the inflammatory reactions in the body, or promote them, or sustain them. And it breaks my heart, but the big group on the left includes all of our favorite foods. And it's a very high score, 0.72, compared to tomatoes, which were 0.78. So the takeaway here is these are not foods that are going to kill you. They're just not foods that are as body friendly as vegetables and beans and leafy vegetables and fruits. So these should be considered important because they do contribute nutrients. But keep in mind that you want to have lots of anti-inflammatory vegetables in your meals, as well as the pro-inflammatory starches. I'm going to take a sip on my ginger tea and hope it works. Okay, next one. By the way, this list was research done, and it did not include the anti-inflammatory role of ginger, turmeric, basil, oregano, all those plants that we talked about earlier that are all in the mint family that you can grow. They also have significant anti-inflammatory scores, but the research project that created this list simply didn't measure the spices, but they are as well very protective, very body friendly. Question?
One of the questions, I think Susan said she was surprised to see that sweet potatoes was on that list.
Yeah. Yeah, I should have checked the chat here and there. So yeah, because a lot of times the reason for the pro-inflammatory effect has to do with glycemic index. And while sweet potatoes have, I guess that ginger tea wasn't as magical as I wanted it to be. The sweet potatoes do have beta carotene and, good nutrients. So this is not about saying take those out of your menu, but because of the potential for them to have a pro-inflammatory high glycemic effect. And so it comes back to the plate should have a variety of things and not be dominated by these foods. So Barbara, let me know if there's anything else in the chat I should stop and address. I'm going to roll on. Things that should be special occasion, treats. Next one. 10 ways to enjoy, be nutritiously happy during the spring. So I've come to number 5. For all the critters in the world, spring is a time of awakening. The birds are tweeting, everybody's reproducing, eggs are hatching. So we also want to sometimes think, what about some of the health claims that we hear about and how valid are they? So I want to take a minute to talk about a health concept called food combining. So the food combining, I should come all the way to the end and then go back to the beginning. It is not valid, but here's how it comes about. It's as though there's the concept of when certain foods are put together, they have an adverse effect on the body. So there are strong recommendations to only eat fruit on an empty stomach, especially melons. Avoid combining starches and proteins. So there's your chicken or tuna fish with bread. That's a starch and a protein, but avoid that. Avoid combining starches with acidic foods. Avoid combining different types of protein. Consume dairy products only on an empty stomach, especially milk. So these are pretty rigid rules that kind of conflict with almost everything that we all do from day to day. One of the healthiest morning meals is something like oatmeal or overnight oatmeal with the addition of nuts and seeds and milk. So it's in a way you're wondering how this got to be. And we have to remember that modern medicine has had an explanation for many conditions that the explanation didn't exist in, 50 to 300 years ago, like way back. And so there are many attempts to prevent conditions based on manipulation of food. But it turns out these rules are rigid and are not valid. So here's what the food combining camp demands. Vegetables work well with most foods, but sweet fruits best combined with celery and lettuce. Okay, if you just want to take a second and look at this chart, you know, if there's anything that you do that has an effect on your well-being, I would not tell you to disregard this and do something different. But I can say there's no science behind it. So let me note, by the way, there is something called an acid ash of the diet. You can affect the pH of the urine with certain concentration of foods, but not in a way. The body will neutralize as many things that are extremely acidic or extremely alkaline because the body cannot function. None of our enzymes will function in a very alkaline or very acidic state. So the body handles that. So the belief says, again, that foods that are digested at different speeds can create kind of a, I think I found this phrase online, a traffic jam in your digestive tract. So fast digested foods are going to be slowed down by slow digested foods. This is a belief that different foods require different enzymes to be broken down, and that these enzymes are vary at different pH. pH means acidity levels in your gut. So that if a food requires a different pH, your body can't properly digest both of them at the same time. Okay. So an acid fruit might require an alkaline condition for absorption, and a neutral food like meat might require acid for absorption and processing. But here's the deal. The body is very, so while this is probably more information than you need at the moment, you don't have everything, as I said, like a traffic jam. Starting in the esophagus, starting in the mouth, you start to digest things. In the stomach, you can see where certain nutrients are absorbed. You can see where other nutrients absorbed in different regions of the intestine. I'm going to show you another picture. It's basically saying the same thing, but it's a little more colorful. Sorry. So these different sequences in the intestines are evolved to handle certain nutrients that are broken down in the stomach and then pass through. And they are not interfered with by the presence of something else. And here's the final way of seeing that. This is most of the nutrients that we get are absorbed through the surface of the small intestines. So the small intestines has the thing called villi, which are basically a word that it reflects the word finger. So the entire internal surface of the small intestines, about 7 feet, don't quote me, have all these villi all the way internally. And on each villi are what are called microvilli. So you can hardly see them in this particular slide here, but you can see that every villi has lots of microvilli on its surface. Pardon me. So that in the end, the absorptive surface of your digestive tract, I have read and been informed by gastroenterologists, the absorptive surface of your digestive tract could be about the size of a tennis court. And unless you've had surgery or injury or damage, you're absorbing pretty much everything the way it's supposed to be. Some things are absorbed through the stomach, but most of everything is absorbed in the small intestine. So these regions here are the small intestines. And when it gets to the large intestine, most of what's going on is it's the reabsorption of water and a couple of minerals. And what else is going on is that there's lots of acid in the stomach that helps protect you from, obviously it's not a perfect protection, but it protects from food poisoning. The acid can kill a lot of the kinds of bacteria that would make us sick. Okay, I'm going to roll down, and hopefully this is going to, comfort you. So in this sense, food combining is not valid, but there is a well-established amount of information that some foods do well when in the same meal with other foods, and the flip side is true. Some foods don't do well in the same meal with other foods. So, for example, iron requires an acid environment to be absorbed, and citrus fruits like oranges, grapefruit, also the vitamin C of cabbage, the vitamin C of broccoli, improves iron absorption. And the beta carotene in carrots, as well as the beta carotene of all orange and yellow vegetables, pardon me, is better absorbed in the presence of fat. Now, if you eat baby carrots by themselves, it's not a bad thing. You're not losing all your beta carotene. But beta carotene is a fat soluble nutrient, and it absorbs better if fat is present. Most of the time, there's a little bit of fat in every meal, one way or another. On the flip side, calcium oxalate has been known to interfere with iron absorption and calcium absorption. And there is oxalate in spinach. So one of the questions is, does the oxalate in spinach keep you from absorbing the calcium in milk? And it probably does, but it doesn't mean you should never eat spinach or never drink milk or never put the two together, because life is filled with about 80,000 different meals and it's okay. But just be aware that there is that interaction. Chocolate also has oxalate. So if you've added chocolate flavoring to milk, are you impairing your calcium absorption? Pardon me, somewhat, but not to the point of saying this was a bad idea, I should never have done it, and there's no regrets. You're still getting good protein from your milk, you're still getting good thiamine and riboflavin, you're still getting lots of things, and you can get calcium from other foods. So, but it is true that certain intrinsic substances interfere with nutrient absorption, and certain intrinsic substances enhance nutrient absorption. So there you have it. But the idea of never having fruits and vegetables combined, or never having acid things combined with base, and having to be so rigid and strict, it isn't supported. Okay. Moving on. 10 ways to enjoy, nutritiously enjoy your spring.
Okay, I had a question here.
Yes.
Is that true for other types of milk?
Almond milk or cashew milk or soy milk? If the question is, the concern is the calcium in the milk. So if you have an oxalate source present in a food, in a meal with a good source of calcium, that could be cheese. Sorry, let me just take another sip. Or calcium could be found in like sunflower seeds. An oxalate will interfere, but if the milk that you're selecting is almond milk or oat milk, it may not have been calcium fortified. So the calcium content, which might be insignificantly low, is not going to be affected. So in other words, chocolate flavored soy milk, oh, by the way, soy milk usually is calcium fortified. So I think the question was, is this true for all milk? And I ascribe the answer to the presence of calcium in the milk is the important variable, not milk itself. Now, let me know if that answers the question, because I think I kind of flipped it. So far, so good?
I guess I would add cocoa powder to a coconut milk very low in calcium. Almond,
Sounds
Very-
good. Save me some. Because there's not a lot of calcium naturally in odor almond milk. Unless it's been fortified with calcium, and that would be on the label, because that would make the product fall within criteria for the WIC program and for school lunch, and make it more appealing for consumers who want to get calcium sources. But most of the time, almond milk and oat milk are promoted because they either have they're a vegetarian, and they're sort of someone who doesn't want to drink the milk of another animal doesn't have to make that choice. If someone's doing it for environmental reasons, I think almond milk is very environmentally greedy. It takes a lot of water and a lot of land. But that's another story. Okay, so let's talk about saying this collectively as older people. And how our digestion, since we've come from the discussion about food combining, being all about how foods go into our mouth and reach our digestive tract, there are things that change. So for example, as we mature, the bile levels that are released by the gallbladder are lower. So that suggests that maybe it impairs how efficiently we absorb fat. We need bile for the absorption of fat. So that means fat may stay in the stomach longer. And the line here that says the postprandial satiety translates into the experience of feeling full. If we don't absorb our fat as efficiently as we did as younger adults, and the fat remains in the stomach longer because we're not making as much bile, this will make a meal seem to stay and make us feel full longer. That could result in us reducing how much food we eat overall. Because you'd say, oh, I'm not hungry, so I had lunch at 12:30. It's 6:45. I'm not hungry, I'm okay. And in the end, that's a very long interval for not eating. So some will say, for those who are working closely with an aging population, to really take a look at the interval of time between meals and make sure that it's not extended because of feeling full much longer, because that raises the risk of malnutrition. So no one will ever claim I do that. I definitely eat less than 4 hours later. So I hope everyone else gets a little something. So what's the solution to that? And that might be to have smaller meals and more frequent meals and snacks. So there's a source down here, ninkatek.com, which I found online as an agency that works closely with aging populations, published this suggested list of small, reasonably low fat and enjoyable meals that we can encourage ourselves and our friends and loved ones to eat. So, avocado toast with egg. So avocado has fat, so I'm not saying this is fat-free, but it's not a high-fat meal. Because remember, it's the fat that doesn't get digested and absorbed as efficiently. Banana pancakes, partly because banana pancakes will have a stronger flavor than plain pancakes, slightly different texture, and have just a little more oomph. A salmon burrito. But by the way, I think these ideas are very creative and interesting. I think a chicken burrito, a turkey burrito, a beef burrito, they're all going to be good. But a salmon burrito, because we do want to get our omega-3 fats, smoothies, and stove-topped or air-popped popcorn. In other words, not the microwave popcorn, especially when you see the box is labeled extra butter. Okay. So the idea is to get, pardon me, encourage ourselves to eat more frequently to get the calories that we need. Okay, and from another source, I threw in turkey omelet with rice, red pepper and tomato soup, croutons, yogurt parfait. Okay, so that's where I said number 6 is to remember our health awakening and look at how we, as we do eat carefully, is there anything about our digestion that changes as we mature? Well, there's a little more. Turns out that a lot of us have reduced acidity in our stomach. So the other comment was about producing bile. This is about acidity, normal hydrochloric acid acidity. And because vitamin B12 and calcium, iron, and magnesium all require an acidic stomach, it's a possibility that we absorb these less efficiently. So the takeaway is make sure that you're enjoying good sources of magnesium, iron, calcium, and B12. And not to say triple up or buy a supplement, but enjoy the foods. And the final one, the second point, as we age, peristalsis is slow. Peristalsis is defined as the speed, I'm sorry, the normal muscular contractions that propel the contents of our digestive tract from the start to the end. And peristalsis takes place for 24 hours, but immediately after consuming a meal, peristalsis picks up. So if peristalsis is slower, that also may mean that we feel like our food is still in our stomach and still in our belly longer. But also, as it's moving through the large intestines more slowly, there's more time for water to be reabsorbed, and this could lead to constipation or a stool that is harder and less watery. Sorry, this is being discussed as you just finished lunch. Okay. So that means we want to make sure we're eating good sources of fiber, which will bulk up the stool. And that goes back to our opening chat about the importance of having lots of vegetables and fruits. Okay, reduced ability to recognize vital senses like hunger, thirst, taste, and smell. I don't think we lose it, we just reduce it. And one of the things about hunger and thirst is that sometimes we confuse one for the other. So regarding thirst, I want to remind everybody that total fluid requirements may vary from person to person, and you don't have to aim to have 7 cups a day of, 8 glasses a day of 8 ounces of water. My trick is to use an empty spaghetti sauce jar and try to make sure I have refilled it twice in the same day. And all the other foods that you eat and the other beverages that you have also contribute to your total fluid demand. And you've probably caught me trying to drink my water from, guess what? My empty mason jar, empty spaghetti sauce jar. Remember that your coffee and tea counts as your fluid, but the caffeine, pardon me, may also suppress your appetite. So it's important to say a cup of coffee is fine, but it shouldn't be the meal, or it shouldn't be something that will affect your desire to eat more food. Okay, next slide. We're down to 7 out of 10. Eat more veggies in the morning. Okay, this is about spring again. Here's some of the suggestions, and this comes from a consumer dietitians at Consumer Reports. This is partly to say, once again, to have smaller, more fun meals that are not necessarily heavy on fat, but are good sources of fiber and the rest. So they say top toast with tomato and cucumber, top toast with mashed avocado. Was everybody on this avocado? Like, this has been, people been eating avocado on toast for years and years. Okay, but it's now a new thing. Breakfast burrito. a sweet potato topped with yogurt. That is absolutely a great idea. And then any leftovers from the night before can also be blended into a meal. This suggestion, the morning toast, pardon, beyond marmalade and butter. This comes from Rachel Ray magazine. So avocado smash. Well, I guess that's not exactly the newest idea. Spiced chickpea smash, beets and feta cheese smash, a white bean smash, a butternut squash smash. All good ideas. Very simple, small, not high fat, very appealing, good nutritional richness. Okay, we're going down 8, 9, 10 are our last 3. So, spring is not necessarily a time that food safety in the kitchen gets more risky, but we're going into summer where then it might be more important to remember how to manage to protect foods from changes in the environment. So I'm going to go through these quickly with you. Remember, the Food and Drug Administration says the 4 basic steps are to clean, starting with your hands, your counters, your tools. And it can be with soapy water, doesn't have to be bleach, but just thorough. FDA says, please don't take your meat or your fish and wash it in your sink or poultry, because water that splashes against the side of the sink could contain some bacteria that could be cross-contaminated onto something that's not going to be cooked. Everyone I know, no exception, washes their chicken. So just remember, if you have to do it because that's what you feel comfortable doing, wash your sink too. Okay. I also clean the lids on canned goods before opening because they have come from a factory, they've come from a truck, they've been handled. Sometimes they've been walked across by little things with 4 feet and cute little ears. Let's move on. Okay, if you feel like you need to wash your fruits and vegetables, you can use normal tap water, normal dishwashing liquid, even a bar soap, if that's what, and I do that occasionally. These products are in the market that also help to pull away some of the natural wax that may trap things on foods. Okay, the second goal of the FDA is to separate foods, even in your grocery cart, but definitely when they get home, so that anything that will not be cooked, but could be handled and then touched with something that let me say that differently. If you have a food like a chicken that may have some liquid coming out of the package, or ground beef, try not to let that touch something that won't have heat applied, because you could cross-contaminate. Okay, the third goal of the FDA is to make sure things are cooked. Beef, lamb, pork up to 145, fish 145, ground beef, pork, lamb 160, turkey, chicken, and duck 165. It's highly recommended that everybody have a thermometer in their home, because even turning pink does not assure you that these temperatures have been reached. And these temperatures are based on killing what possibly could hurt you, like listeria, salmonella, E. coli, lots of delicious little combos of critters. Okay. And the 4th FDA goal is to remember to refrigerate things right away, no longer than 2 hours out of the refrigerator. And if you find something that has to be cooked but it's frozen, the FDA recommends you thaw it in the refrigerator if you have the time, under cold water or in the microwave. And that's because if there is a bacterial load in the food, the center of the food is going to warm up at last. The outside of the food will warm, or shall I say thaw, first. And you want to be sure that you don't give the food time for the center to let lots and lots of microorganisms, or while the center is thawing, that the outer layers are letting microorganisms start to divide and multiply and grow. Okay, I just put this in here because I thought it was funny. When I went to the FDA site to get that information, this was one of the images on the website. And it was about food safety in the kitchen. And I thought, that is the most inappropriate way to handle a knife, but okay. They didn't call me and ask me my opinion. Here goes, let's move. Okay, so while I'm on the government website, I said, well, let's see what CDC says about spring and health. And the CDC literally has this 8 strategies for a healthy spring. Remember, we're coming out of winter. So move more and sit less. I try. I do try. Okay, eat healthy foods. Well, we've talked about that. Choose your drinks wisely. We've addressed the idea of fluids. Get enough sleep, be sun safe, brush your teeth, don't use tobacco, and learn your health history. Well, number 4 and 5 will be my numbers 9 and 10. When it comes to getting enough sleep, nutrition does play a role. So, first of all, be sure to eat lots of foods that have magnesium. And that includes leafy vegetables like Swiss chard, spinach. It includes things like okra. It includes seeds and nuts. It includes the pumpkins. You don't have to buy a supplement, but eat lots of magnesium-rich foods. Less related to nutrition is try to get sunshine every day and enjoy 30 minutes of walking. Nutritionally speaking, try to avoid caffeine after 4 p.m. Oops. And then if you have trouble sleeping, nutritionally speaking, you might benefit from a small snack with some carbohydrate and some protein. And remember, nutritionally speaking, that if you have a lot of fluid or a heavy meal before bedtime, that's also going to interfere with your sleep. So the other point that the FDA recommends for a healthy spring is to be sun safe. And that brings us to my final point, which is the role of these plant pigments, lutein and zeaxanthin. Oh, I think I shouldn't have put an N there. Zeaxanthin. Okay. These are pigments that are in the family like they call carotenoids. Excuse me. They have lots of benefits. One of them is that lutein can be converted to zeaxanthin in the body. And zeaxanthin actually lines the retina of the eye and protects the retina from ultraviolet rays. So while we do wear sunglasses, we can be exposed to ultraviolet rays just walking across the street. So the goal is to have lots of these carotenoid foods. Carotenoid often makes you think of the word carrot and you think of the color orange. But these pigments can be purple, they can be orange, yellow. And here is an example. If we're aiming for 2 milligrams a day, 100 grams of raw spinach, which is not a lot of spinach. I wanted to take a minute to translate that into like 1 cup. But that's pretty much a fourth of a 1 pound bag. And see how much lutein is in 100 grams of raw spinach. Keeping up with green peas, romaine lettuce, summer squash, also great sources of magnesium, if you remember from the previous slide, Brussels sprouts, broccoli. So in a way, you get so many good nutritional bargains by having all of these wonderful foods. And then one final source, threw in another line, goji berries, human eggs, human milk. Don't eat humans, human milk. Corn are also rich sources of zeaxanthin. Okay, that brings me at 1:58 to the last slide of my presentation on 10 nutritious ways to enjoy spring. And here are my references. Whoops. If anybody needs them. And if there's time, Barbara, I'm okay to take some more questions.
That
So
was
the chat,
excellent, Nadine, as always. And I wonder if we could be sent the slides.
yes, I think Barbara, much to my surprise, when I got ready to email the PowerPoint to Barbara, it had too much megabytes, and I had to break it into 3. But I'm pretty sure I've sent her the complete thing in 3 parts, and she usually I'm sure Barbara's not
I
far
didn't
away.
realize it was in 3 parts. So, but yes, I'm saving it off as a
Okay.
PDF. If anybody wants it, let me know. You can email me at food@rssny.org. And then it'll also be up on our wellness, the RSS Wellness Corner page, website.
Barbara, this is Amy Barrett. Can you send me some?
As soon as I get it organized,
I'll be happy to create a PDF myself. That won't take up.
Oh,
Gmail won't let you send more than 2,500,000, whatever it is, megabytes. So it was 41, and I had to.
If you can do that, otherwise I'll put it together, when I get a chance. As soon as
I'll
I can.
try right away, and if I can't, I'll
You'll let me
call
know.
Yes, I will do.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry for the coughing, everybody. It's just like I'm trying to get rid of this cough. It just loves
You
me.
don't need to apologize. It was a tremendous presentation as always.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions?
Can you put the reference slide back up again?
Sure thing. I've
Thanks.
talked about this website, healthline.com. I trust it for their nutrition newsletters, because all of their health newsletters, because I think they use medically trained journalists or writers, and they do fact checking, and they also provide references to any claims they make. And they don't dumb it down. They talk to you like, you got a brain.
I was just alarmed by the sweet potatoes and yams, because I eat a lot of.
Please continue. Please don't stop. Yeah. It's a little bit naked to just talk about anti-inflammatory without a context. These are sort of the idea, and I don't want to go on because I know everyone might have something else to do starting at 2 p.m. Then
Yeah.
RSS might need the Zoom link. But the goal is to say, if there's a strong connection between pro-inflammatory conditions and circumstances and the development of chronic diseases, because it means that the immune system is somehow ever so slightly or significantly impaired, and it can't undertake its usual functions. So like a cancer cell, for example, that wants to proliferate and become a bunch of cells that can then spread, the immune system normally will recognize it and mount an inflammatory reaction to suppress it. But if you have multiple inflammatory reactions going on in your body, then the immune system is impaired. So the more anti-inflammatory foods you eat, the better. And you just don't want to have a diet. And don't we all know people who would eat nothing but pancakes and waffles and French fries 7 days a week?
Mhm.
And they'll live to be 100 and laugh at me, dance on my grave. But
Yeah.
the research says it does make a difference. And so to the best of your ability, definitely leave this stuff out. And these are things that are for occasions. This is special occasion food. And over here, these are good, and just pair them with lots of anti-inflammatory veggies also. And I agree, high five. A sweet potato in the morning is like a gift. It just fell from heaven, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, keep it up.
Thank
I wouldn't
you.
have it with bacon, but bacon, it's,
No.
I just recently saw an article about burned and charred foods, the way we love that extra little, crispiness. Might not be the best thing either, but that's another talk.